നമസ്കാരം. നോർത്ത് അമേരിക്കൻ മലയാളികളുടെ വർണ്ണക്കാഴ്ചകളുമായി എത്തുന്ന അമേരിക്കൻ ലൈഫ് സ്റ്റൈലിലേക്ക് എല്ലാ പ്രിയപ്പെട്ട പ്രേക്ഷകർക്കും സ്വാഗതം.
Namaskaram, good morning, afternoon, and evening to you all. My name is Krishna and I'm from Seattle, Washington.
And I'm Amrutha Pradeep from Seattle, Washington. Abhi and I would like to welcome you all to Flowers TV USA's American Youth.
This episode is powered by Path IV.
Welcome to our 6th episode of American Youth. In the last episode, we talked about camel and youth involvement in volunteering. Today's episode is all about the medical profession. Deciding to go to medical school is a big decision, considering the meticulous process of applying, the anticipation of knowing if you got in, and then the years of rigorous schooling you have to go through to finally be able to become a doctor. These steps may sound confusing and overwhelming, but we're here to make it a little bit easier.
We have 4 interviews lined up. Each interviewee is in a different stage of their medical path. First, let's hear from Vismaya Mohan and Baylor University student Kuncheria, who is joining us from Chicago.
Thank you, Abhi. The medical profession is an extraordinary combination of self-sacrifice, discipline, hard work, and purity of thought. America is home to a multitude of Indian doctors, some of whom are the most brilliant minds you will ever meet. America is also home to some of the most renowned medical schools in the world. You might know of some of these, like Harvard and Yale, and may be wondering, how can I get into one of these schools? For this, let's turn to Kuncheria. He is currently enrolled at one of the most prestigious medical schools in the world, Baylor College of Medicine in Texas. Welcome to American Youth, an infotainment program led by the youth of our community. Hi, Alan.
Hey, Vismaya. Thanks for having me.
Alan, I am honored to interview you today. Medical school is so difficult, and you're at one of the most leading ones in the world. Can you let us know a little bit about your background?
Yeah, for sure. So, a little bit about me. I'm a first-generation Indian American. My parents came to the U.S. 20 years ago to New Jersey, which is where I was born. And when I was 6, we moved to Chicago, where I was raised. I went to high school there. And whilst in high school, I applied to some BSMD programs. And by God's grace, I was lucky enough to get into the one at Rice. So it's a Rice-Baylor medical program. So I went to undergrad at Rice University, which is in Houston, Texas. And now I'm currently a first-year medical student at Baylor College of Medicine.
That's great. So, did you always know you wanted to become a doctor? And can you tell us a little bit about your path to get to medical school?
For sure. I can't say that I always wanted to be a doctor. I think I grew that passion in high school. Early high school, I took like business classes. I took some engineering classes to see what I was really interested in. But what I was really interested in is I applied to this mini medical school, which is nearby my house, hosted by Dr. Rubin. And what mini medical school is essentially they condense 4 years of medical school into a 6-week program where you get different rotations in OB, in surgery, in ophthalmology, and they'll let you get like clinical experience with that. So it was really eye-opening into what medical school really was. So after that, I really started my passion for medical school and started tailoring my extracurriculars and courses towards medicine.
Well, it's great you finally found what you wanted to do.
Absolutely.
Do you have a structured science stream that you have to pursue in high school in order to prepare for medical school?
Yeah, so in high school, I would say it's pretty structured. You have to take like a core set of science classes like chemistry, biology, physics, which all medical schools look at. And I took a lot of different AP courses, and I think AP courses are very valuable because the credits you get in high school can count towards credit in college. So actually in college, I didn't have to take certain science courses because I had already taken it in high school. So that was very helpful. And so each medical school will look at different science classes. So when I was applying for med school, a lot of the schools that I applied to looked at AP chemistry as a requirement. So I think it's very important to look at the medical schools that you're trying to apply to and see which course load they require.
I've heard that in the US, you need to do a 4-year degree in a related field before doing medical school. Can you elaborate on this?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that you have to do it in a related field. I did my degree in neuroscience, so that is pretty related to it's just a STEM degree, which a lot of people do, but that's not required at all. So a lot of my friends did liberal arts degrees or business degrees, and all you have to do is add the core courses of like biochemistry, organic chemistry. Each medical school have a different requirements, so you can do any degree you really want to, which is really freeing. You just need that core set of courses that you have to do to apply for medical school.
I've heard that in the US, you need to do a 4-year degree in a related field before going to medical school. Can you elaborate on this?
Yeah, so in the US, you really don't have a set degree that you need to get into medical school. So my degree, I was in neuroscience, which is what a lot of people tend to do. They do some STEM degree, biology, biochemistry, but you actually don't need to do anything in STEM. You could be a English major, a religion major, a business major. And as long as you do those core courses that all medical schools require, for example, some of them are organic chemistry, biochemistry, biology, as long as you do those core set of courses, then you're still applicable to apply for medical school. So it's really freeing to be able to do any type of degree that you want to.
Wow, that's really cool. And that's really different from India. What are the MCATs? How do you prepare for them? And what scores do you have to get?
Yeah, so the MCAT is the standardized test that medical schools look at. If you think about when you're applying for college, it's equivalent to the SAT or the ACT, but it's a lot more science focused. There's 4 sections, biology, chem and physics, psych and soc, and a critical analysis and reading section. So there's 4 sections, and then they combine the scores for those 4 sections, and the highest score that you can get is a 528. And if you get around a 520, that's, I think, the 99th percentile. It's very competitive. So for studying for the MCAT, the way I studied was that I bought a lot of books for each section. Like Kaplan has a lot of different books, but there are other resources such as the Princeton Review, Khan Academy, UWorld, and AAMC, which is the medical association, who hosted the MCAT. They also have a lot of test banks that I think is very important to do when you're studying for the MCAT.
Wow, it sounds like you had to study quite a bit.
It was a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how do you know which medical schools to apply to?
That's a good question. There are so many medical schools in the U.S. It's really hard to narrow down the ones that you want to apply to. So I think there are some key traits that you should look at for each school. One, you should be looking at the curriculum. So whether the curriculum is pass-fail during its preclinical years, I think it's very important. Another thing that you should look at is how long the preclinical curriculum is. So at my school, the preclinical curriculum is 18 months. I think a couple of years ago, it was 2 years. And now a lot of the medical schools are trying to shorten that preclinical down. So my school next year, it's only going to be 1 year. So what that really does is that it gives you more clinical time, more time in the hospitals to interact with patients and get more experience. So that's another thing that you could look at. Another thing is where your rotations are going to be. So which hospitals you're going to be at when you're doing your rotations is also very important. And lastly, any unique aspects of your school is also important. So my school, there's a space program. We're in Houston, right next to the Johnson Space Center. So we have a unique training program to be a doctor for astronauts to be in space. So I think those unique aspects for different schools are very important.
Thank you. You give us a lot of good strategies there.
Yeah.
So I've heard that you need to do a lot of volunteering and research to get into like a good medical school. So what activities did you do?
So in high school, I did some volunteering. I actually started volunteering at a rehabilitation center near my house. And from there, I moved to an emergency center where I also did some volunteering. I think it's very important to get patient interaction when you're doing these volunteering opportunities. So that emergency center really gave me a lot of patient interaction. I also did another program at a hospital, which was called the Penwazi program. And this combined shadowing and volunteering at the same time. So it was very good. You basically shadowed different nurses in different fields. And you got to also volunteer and help them out with what they were doing. In terms of research, I think research in high school is very important. And it really shows medical schools that you're capable of doing extensive research, which is also important in medical school. So I started research my sophomore year at the NIH, the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda. And I did research in bioinformatics. The next year I did research at Northwestern, the med school Feinberg, and that was in otolaryngology. So I think research is very important in constructing a good med school application.
Wow, it sounds like you did a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot of research.
So what are your favorite hobbies? And how do you balance this with your intense study program?
Yeah, so recently I've been climbing a lot, going bouldering with my friends that I've met at medical school. And I think that's a really good hobby to have. And I think it's really important in med school. You can't really just study all the day. you're going to get burnt out a lot. And physician burnout is very prevalent in the US right now. I think over 60% of physicians have experienced burnout, I think that every year. So it's really important to establish that work-life balance early on, especially in medical school, because you're going to carry that routine throughout your life. And given how long the medical school journey is, it's really important to establish those habits early on.
I agree. Thank you so much, Alan. You have provided me and the youth in our community with invaluable information. Wishing you all the very best to become Dr. Alan Kuncheria.
Thank you, Vismaya. And thank you, Flowers TV, for having me on today. The medical school profession and the medical journey is very long, but it is one that is very rewarding. If you're passionate about it, I would absolutely encourage you to pursue it.
Thank you so much, Alan. Now, back to Abhi.
Thank you, Alan and Vismaya.
What an insightful interview. I hope you are encouraged and inspired after Alan's talk. Let's now hear from Ishika Binu. She's a high school senior from Seattle and she just got into med school. She's going to do a joint BS MD program from Seton Hall University and Hackensack Medical School.
Thank you, Abhi. My name is Ishika Binu and I'm a senior in Bellevue, Washington. An important piece of advice that I would love to give you all who are pursuing medicine or even just the healthcare field is to gain as much experience as you can as soon as you can. Experiences such as volunteering, clinical experience, research hours, anything where you can learn what you like or what you dislike or just learn what you want to learn more about is important. And personally, this helped me know that I want to make a commitment to my joint BSMD 7-year medical program at Seton Hall. It's also important to consider that you have to balance your school life as well as your extracurriculars. You need to maintain your grades in school as well as study for the tests outside of school, such as SATs, ACTs, and any AP tests that you want to take. It's important to maintain a balanced lifestyle as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishika. What a great commitment for the next 7 years. All the best, Ishika.
അമേരിക്കൻ ലൈഫ് സ്റ്റൈലിൽ ഒരിടവേള.
Getting into a top college can provide life-changing opportunities, but gaining admission to top universities is difficult. Then how can students make these dreams a reality? Path Ivy Dream College Admissions. Path Ivy provides organized step-by-step guidance, data-driven college admission strategy, personalized coaching, and practice for how to do this successfully. We can help you every step of the way. Path Ivy has helped hundreds of students to achieve admission to many top universities like Harvard, Stanford, Yale, Carnegie Mellon, Johns Hopkins, and Berkeley. Make right decisions at the right time and secure your future. Path Ivy Dream College Admissions. Call Vicky Mehta 425-200-5345 or visit pathivy.com.
Now, let's hear from Sumit Thomas, a medical director at GenCare Senior Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sumit Thomas. I'm an internal medicine physician. Currently, I'm the medical director at GenCare Senior Medical Center, Atlanta, Georgia. I have been in the medical profession in the US for close to 15 years. Started my journey back in India, where I did my MBBS at Kakatiya Medical College, Warangal. Then I came to the US, did my internal medicine residency at Eastern Virginia Medical School, Norfolk, Virginia. Growing up in India, in the busy and populous cities of India, a lot of people have health concerns or healthcare challenges. There is needs of medical needs which are not really met. It had always inspired me as a doctor, the amount of difference one can make in somebody's life, getting better health and also having a better life. And I would say that that's been one of my inspirations to go into the medical field. Practicing medicine in India and practicing medicine in America, it has its own differences. The process is different. The system is different. The hospital-based systems, the insurance systems here and in India are different. But ultimately, I think both of them do the same thing here or in India. You take care of people, you treat people, you help them. And I think that's the big unifying factor in the whichever process or system we are in. Definitely a little different, but at the same time, it is the same. I sometimes have people ask me what's the hardest part of being a doctor. And in my personal experience, there are times when it could be like emotionally draining. You interact with so many different patients, with so many different health conditions, different families. We always strive for the best outcome for everybody, but sometimes there is no best outcome. It's not possible medically. How much we are hope for, how much we want, sometimes it just can't happen. So those times, it could be emotionally draining. With the families, we try to bring them together, to accept what's going on and to move forward with it. But that could be a little challenging and emotionally draining. I mostly have a lot of, parents and students ask me, they want to go into the medical field, what would be your advice? My ultimate advice for that is you have a passion for it, go for it. Medicine is it's a good profession. It does demand a lot of hard work, a lot of commitment. If you're willing to put in that commitment, you have the passion for it. Definitely at the other end of it, it's a very rewarding profession. It's a very humanitarian thing to be doing. And you feel a genuine love and warmth when you are able to interact with people. It's a very fulfilling profession. So I would say if you have the passion for it, I think you should just go for it. In all these years practicing as a doctor, I've noticed the most favorite part of my job, I would always say, is, to be able to connect with people, to be able to be there when they need you, to be able to make a difference in their life. When you see patients, every so often, you see them like every month, every 3 months, you build these long-term relationships over the years. I've been in the same practice for around 10 years, so I have a lot of patients, who have been with me for 8 or 9 years, and it's a long stretch of time. You are with them, you share their health concerns, and you are there with them for every thick and thin, and that kind of builds this really special bond, and I feel that has been the most favorite part of my job, and it kind of is very fulfilling to be there for them, and they do reciprocate the same kind of love, and it's very touching to be actually a part of that relationship. When comparing being a doctor to other professions, I would say that the first thing definitely is the time it takes for you to become a doctor, the education of it. You're going to graduate from high school, then you go to college, then 4 years of med school, then you go to like 3 years of residency, and then if you want to do like fellowship or specialization, that's more additional years added. So definitely a long journey to become a doctor. And once you start practicing, compared to other professions, there are certain limitations on how many days you can take off, or you cannot get all your holidays off, and for all the festivals you can't be home, and so you have to, there is also that distinction, and especially when COVID happened, we noticed with medical professions, being able to be there, there is more restraints and constraints compared to other professions, mostly.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Sumi. Now we have Dr. Chino Manikarote lined up from San Diego. She's our regional head of Flowers TV USA. Over to Dr. Chino.
Hi, thank you for inviting me to the show and for asking me to share some insights about being a doctor, some of the things I like about the career and some things I'm not very crazy about. And finally, some recommendations to those who may be considering to pursue a career in it. So I came to the US when I was 18 years old with my parents. The very next month, I started undergrad at Penn State. So things were happening very quickly. And believe it or not, the 18 years I was in India, I had no intention of becoming a doctor. In fact, doctors scared me, hospitals scared me, and I did not think it was something that I could do. But then being here, my first 2 years of undergrad, I got to explore a lot of different career options. I got to explore a lot of arenas that I was actually interested in. I loved chemistry, so I became a chemistry major. I took a lot of prerequisite courses for medicine, and I worked inside a hospital. I volunteered with some doctors, and finally, at some point, it was a very gradual sort of interest where I realized, this is my calling and this is what excites me, and that made me become a doctor. So my third year of undergrad, I took the MCATs and I got into medical school at Drexel College of Medicine in Pennsylvania. And 4 years later, I did residency at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And then I became an attending in San Diego, California. I'm a hospitalist. So it was a long and difficult process. Just saying it, it may seem like a simple process just the way I said it, but it took a long time to become a doctor. But looking back, I feel like it was the right decision. I have the same excitement and enthusiasm that I had when I started off working as a doctor. My most favorite part of the job is interacting with human beings, interacting with patients, listening to their stories, trying to figure out, what's wrong with them, why they not feeling well, coming up with a diagnosis, telling them, this is something that we know how to take care of. We have medications for it. Many other people go through the same illness like you. So giving them that kind of reassurance, I think that's my favorite part. Of course, there are a lot of times when you don't know what the diagnosis and we don't have medications to treat every disease out there. So those situations arise as well. But even then, being part of that journey, being with them when they're in their most difficult phase of life, I think that's my favorite part of the job. The thing that I'm not really crazy about in my job, I guess also deals with the same interaction with people in terms of having to break bad news. And no matter how many times you do that, it doesn't get any easier, right? You have to tell a patient or their loved one that they have a terminal illness or they're heading towards end of life and the decisions they have to make at that time. So it is always a very difficult process doing that. But over the years, I've realized it's not something that I have to do on my own as a single entity. I work in a hospital setting. I work with a group of doctors. There's a team of doctors for the patient. And it's a collective decision that we come up with after many discussions. So that eases it a little bit, but it's still not the most fun part. Finally, some recommendations to those who may be considering it as a profession. Number one, I think don't box yourself into this pre-med category right away when you start off as an undergrad. Even though you knew you wanted to be a doctor all your life, give yourself that liberty to explore other things that interest you. 90% of my medical school class, they were not pre-med majors. They did other things that excited them, and then they eventually came into decision of medicine. Of course, take all the prerequisites that are recommended for medical school, but also take a variety of courses, and that will make you a well-rounded person for yourself as a person, but is also going to help you in terms of your resume when you apply to medical school. Secondly, I want to say, I've heard friends in other professions say, some days they were not feeling up to it, so they probably worked 50%, and then another day they worked 30% of their ability, another day they worked 100% of their ability. Well, medicine is not a career like that. You have to be your 100% every single day. Every patient that you see deserves the same kind of respect and energy and attention from you, right? So it's not that you can slack off certain days. So it is a job that requires you to be there with it 100% of the time. And lastly, I want to say, make sure you get some hands-on experience before applying to medical school. Go inside a hospital, work with some doctors, some teams to see what it's like. Work in a clinic setting, shadow a doctor. Because no matter what you think of medicine from the outside, it's very different when you're actually doing it. It may look like a glamorous, high-paying job, but there's a lot of time commitments, a lot of effort and hard work that goes into the work itself. So I think it's mandatory that you should have some sort of hands-on experience before you apply for medical school. So thank you again for inviting me. I hope this was helpful to some of you. Thanks again.
Thanks for sharing, Dr. Chino. With that, we come to an end of this episode. This is Amrutha.
And this is Abhi, and we'll see you next time on
American Youth.
പുതിയ കാഴ്ചകളുമായി നമുക്ക് വീണ്ടും കാണാം. This is Shana Mohan signing off. Bye bye.